Yo, I'm cool. What's going on?
Hate to break it to you, buddy, but you're really not. So embarrassing.
You know, my daughter's right. I'm not cool. When I try to look cool, I look absolutely ridiculous. I shouldn't bother trying to look like I'm cool. You shouldn't bother being someone who you're not meant to be. And it took Jacob, a long time to learn that lesson. His whole life, he was a wannabe Esav. He wanted to be like his older twin brother, Esav, who was cool. In light of this, the story of the theft of the blessing, when Yaakov or Jacob steals Esav's blessing, is misunderstood. It's misunderstood even by the Mefarshim, even by many of the commentators. The conventional understanding is Rivka and Yaakov determined that they have to get the blessing of the firstborn from Esav, because if they don't, it's going to be Avraham, Yitzhak, and Esav. Esav is not worthy of the mantle, and Judaism will die in its infancy. In other words, the ends justify the means. They have to get the bracha, so if they have to engage in deceit, so be it, as long as we wind up with Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. However, Rabbi Sachs, Zichrona Livracha, of blessed memory, has a wonderful insight. And what makes it wonderful is it's so clear and obvious when you look at it. He explains that the blessing that Yaakov stole was never intended for Yaakov, and Yaakov didn't even need the blessing in the first place that he stole. Let's look at the story again. After Yaakov steals the blessing, his mom comes to him, Rivka comes to him and says, Yaakov, you better get out of here because Esav is furious with you. You stole his blessing. He's going to kill you. So we know the story that Yaakov runs away. But before he runs away, Yitzhak blesses him a second time. And this time Yitzhak understands he's blessing Yaakov. And what blessing does he give him? It has nothing to do with being powerful and having people bow down to you. He blesses him by saying El Shaddai is going to be your God. You're going to be fruitful. You're going to live in the promised land. You're inheriting the covenant of Avraham. This is the blessing that Yitzhak always meant to give to Yaakov, the bracha, the blessing of Avraham. The blessing of Avraham is not only the blessing of Avraham, it's the blessing of Yisrael. Avraham is a man. Yisrael is a nation. So what Yitzhak is really saying to Yaakov is, Avraham was the first person blessed, and now you're going to take that blessing and expand upon it until it turns into an entire nation, as God promised Avraham. God promised Avraham he'd have many descendants. They turn into a wonderful and powerful nation. You are going to bring that blessing into fruition. Yet Yaakov's entire life, he attempted to avoid that destiny. Even his name itself denotes. So what does Yaakov mean? It comes from the Hebrew word Akav, which means heel. When he was being born, he held on to Esav's heel, trying to push by so he would be the firstborn, not Esav. His whole life he was a wannabe Esav, trying to supplant Esav as a firstborn. Now, when does Yaakov finally accept his destiny, who he's really supposed to be? It's when he has the wrestling match. Now, who's he having the wrestling match with? Some say it's a guardian angel of Esav, even though I prefer the take which says he's actually wrestling himself. This is an internal struggle. He is wrestling that desire, that Yetzer Hara, to become like Esav, to be the wannabe Esav. But now he's beginning to come to terms with the reality that he's not meant to be Esav. He's meant to be Yisrael, Israel. And when does he finally accept the reality of his destiny? When his name is changed. When his opponent, which is really his Yetzer Hara, according to my take, says to him, no longer will you be called Yaakov, the supplanter who's trying to be Esav, but now you'll be called Yisrael, Israel. He finally accepts who he's really supposed to be, not Yaakov, who wants to be Esav. He's finally accepting that he is Yisrael, Israel. And we see later on when he meets up with Esav, he asks Esav how Esav is doing, and Esav says, Yesh li harbe, I have much. Esav then turns to Yaakov and says, well, how are you doing? And Yaakov says, Yesh li kol, I have everything. Now, nobody really has everything, but why is Yaakov able to say honestly that he has everything? Because he's happy with who he is. He's content with who he is, so he feels like he has everything. Ezehu asher hasameach v'helko. Who is truly happy? He who is content with his lot. You try to be somebody else, you are sentencing yourself to a life of misery. You try to be the best possible version of yourself you can be. That's a recipe for happiness. Let's look at some contemporary examples. There's been numerous stories about members, segments of the observant community not following coronavirus regulations. You could go online, you see videos of people at different religious ceremonies, packed into tight spaces. Often many people are not wearing masks, clearly violating social distancing and coronavirus regulations. There's been other reports where you go to a Jewish school and you'll see a sign in English which says closed, sign in Yiddish right next to it which says we're really open, go around to the back. We shouldn't just be our observant selves, we should be our best observant selves. That means prioritizing health and wellness over ritual. That's what it means to be observant. The Torah makes it very clear, over Charta b'chayim laman tihya ata v'zaracha, and you shall choose life that you and your descendants may live. With very few exceptions, health and wellness take priority. There's a Talmudic dictum, Chamira sakanta mi'isada. One must be stricter with the sakana, a danger, than regarding other prohibitions. In other words, it's forbidden to put yourself in danger in order to fulfill a mitzvah, except in very few limited exceptions, as we already said. In fact, to put yourself in danger to perform a mitzvah is sinful. There's a joke which makes the point. A non-Jew goes up to a Jew and gives him a cup of unkosher wine and says, drink the wine or I'll kill you. The Jewish guy says, well, if you're going to force me to drink the wine, at least fill up the cup all the way, please. So it's a funny joke, but the Jew is right, not in asking that the cup be filled completely, but he's right to drink the wine because you're not supposed to martyr yourself to avoid drinking the non-kosher wine. In fact, it would be a sin, a violation of Jewish law to do so. The observant community's response to the coronavirus should be to modify ritual observance so people are not putting themselves in danger while observing the mitzvot. And look, we have a hierarchy which should teach us how to do this. The Torah commands us to safeguard life. The Oraita, this is derived directly from the Torah. Life takes precedence. The idea of davening with a minyan is certainly important, but it's the Rabbanan. It's derived from the rabbis, so it's lower on the hierarchy of observance. So you should only daven with a minyan if you're doing so in a responsible and safe fashion. Now let's look at the public officials who have criticized the Jewish community for these coronavirus violations. They too should strive to be the best possible public servants they could be. They're correct in criticizing the members of the Jewish community who have violated these laws, but they haven't been the best public officials they can be because often the tone they've used has been a very condescending tone. And even more importantly, they fail to criticize other communities which violate the same rules in very similar fashions. Being the best public official you can be means applying standards equally across the board. Let's conclude by acknowledging this pandemic has certainly challenged all of us. Under these circumstances, let's ask ourselves how we could be our best possible selves. How can we be the best possible parent, son, daughter, spouse, caregiver, professional, or friend? If you can do that, even during these trying times, you'll be the best version of yourself. Shabbat Shalom.